Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Sayyidina Muhammad Ashraf al-Mursaleen. Amma ba'd. All right. Who's here for the program and who's here just chilling? For the program? He raises his hands. Which one? Either? Okay. Sisters in the back, you can hear okay? All right. We're going to be a little bit interactive in the beginning as people start rolling in because, yeah, I mean, you shouldn't be punished for coming on time. And at the same time, the people that are coming late, who knows, they may have had an excuse, may have just been normalized that 7:30 really means 8:30. Either way, let's begin with the intention. You hear that a lot, right? Let's begin with the intention. What is your intention of being here? Let me rephrase that. Whatever your intention for being here is, I want to make sure that intention is accomplished. If you're here for the ajr, then make the intention now to wait for salah. Wait for salat al-maghrib. So basically, you're here waiting for salat al-maghrib. I'm just entertaining you in the meantime. If your intention is to walk away with a little bit of knowledge on Islamic psychology, then inshallah ta'ala that is my thughra, that is my responsibility. That's what you can hold me accountable for on the Day of Judgment. Did he talk about Islamic psychology? So those of you that know me, I'm going to overcome this amana immediately. So in the first 5 minutes, I'm going to say, okay, is that enough? Did you get it? You're going to say yes, and then we're good to go. But if you're here because you want to start a trajectory, a pathway to helping others using psychology, then know that this is the first step. If you don't have a paper in front of you and you want to take notes, please do. That's fine. Grab paper, whatever it is. However, this is an introduction. Some people were curious about, well, what is it all about? When you hear the word Islamic psychology, what does that mean to you?
Psychology following the teachings that were taught in Islam.
Psychology following the teachings that were taught in Islam. Okay, what else?
The thought process for understanding and doing basically day-to-day activities.
The thought process for understanding and doing day-to-day activities. So thoughts and behaviors. Okay, fair enough. You're in engineering, aren't you?
Yeah.
Yeah. Why would I say that? Why would I just automatically assume? Not because statistically speaking 90% of our community are there, but also because he starts off with thought process right away, right? It's a process, right? How many other engineers are in the room? All right, yeah, go figure. If I offend you, which I undoubtedly will, please forgive me, all right? Something's gonna come out. Yeah, you're used to it, you're right. You're right. Now Islamic psychology is the last hope for psychology in the Muslim world. Because far too often, this is just a joke, but I mean far too often people look at psychology as, oh, the study of crazy people, right? To see a psychologist means what? Tu bakul, right? This guy, something's not right. That's how it's perceived. And it's not just Muslims, most people. There's a stigma when it comes to psychology, right? But why is it that people don't understand psychology or don't utilize psychological services or don't all of these things? The fault is not on the people, the fault is on the profession. It is our obligation as psychologists, as the profession, as the associations, to bring this scientific understanding of psychology to the people in a way that people are going to understand it. But as the joke says, a psychologist tells you about a problem you didn't know you had in a language you don't understand. And the idea is, it's a field that I am very, very, very passionate about. I love psychology. But I will never pretend like we have reached the qimma, the sinam, the summit of our understanding of psychology. We have not. And whoever tries to say that, unfortunately, is probably being arrogant. Whoever says, that's it, we're done. No more knowledge needed. We have completed it. I mean, what would you say about a person who says, I've learned everything? You'd say one of two things. He's arrogant, or he's a teenager. Just joking. Just kidding, guys. So the idea is, there's always room to grow. And the field of psychology is growing, especially in the area of culturally responsive practice. See, many years ago, you would say cultural sensitivity, and that was enough. It was enough to know, maybe not enough, I shouldn't say it was enough, but people would learn about the foods you ate. So you know that Pakistanis eat biryani, and you know that Palestinians love mansaf, and you know that Egyptians love the, and it's like, okay, great, wonderful. Are you inviting them to a meal, and you want to just make sure that or is it a topic of discussion in the counseling session? And if so, where is that grounded in? In what? Is it in building the working alliance? Is it in, so why are you learning about the person's culture? Here, we want to start off with the notion of why are you here, and why are we talking about Islamic psychology? Somebody asked on the Facebook page, can you tell us what you're going to talk about? I intentionally did not, because I thought, you know what? I love the inquiry-based learning approach, which means you're here, what do you need to learn about it? Now, not every gathering is interactive, and not every individual is comfortable asking questions in public, which is totally fine. I always have a backup. I always have, it's like you walk in to give a khutbah, and your khutbah is about something that addresses youth. But then you realize, oh my God, there's not a single youth here. So you got to be ready to go into parenting, or go into husn al-khatimah, or go into whatever the population is going to benefit from. You have to be ready as a speaker, as an educator, but as a da'iyah, as an Islamic worker, as a father, as a mother, as a sister, as a brother. Shouldn't you be ready to help the people that come and ask you for help? Shouldn't you at least have some skills? But what would you start with? You'd start with their worldview, how they view the world and the problem and all these other things, right? Now later on, inshallah, we'll try to wrap up with some questions on counseling skills. But for now, what I'd like to start with is, what is the definition of Islamic psychology? Is there a psychology of Muslims? Is there a psychology of religion? Is there a religion of psychology? The last one, I don't think so, but I mean, I could be wrong. But there's a big difference on understanding the reality and worldview of Muslims and understanding what it means to say that this is considered a problem only amongst Muslims. Is there such thing as a disorder that is unique only to Muslims? And no, not radicalization. Oh, I wish that was Sheikh Naveed walking in at that moment. That would have been excellent. But it didn't happen. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, there's some political terms that are associated specifically with Muslims, and people seem to be fine with that. But is there a specific disorder, a problem, that if you were to go to, let's say, somebody who had no understanding of Islam whatsoever, they would never see it? Are there certain things in Pakistan, or in India, or in Fiji, or anywhere in the Middle East, that some people here would never understand? That maybe your own siblings would not understand? Can you give me an example?
Those are cultural, right? Not religious.
What's that?
Cultural differences.
Those things? Yeah, we're talking culture, right? Is religion and culture the same thing? No? Now I know exactly what you mean. I know precisely what you mean. You can have a long beard, but you're scamming everybody around you, right? Religion, culture. fathers who beat their kids, religion or culture? Simple. Did the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ ever beat a child? Never. Done. It's no longer religion. فَهُوَ رَدْ. Anything that's not in line with this, فَهُوَ رَدْ. It's gone. It's out. So here's where the interesting piece comes. I know what you're saying. But what if I said culture is defined as everything you do to enjoy the world? Now is religion part of that? Is religion part of your worldview? Is religion part of your daily life? Is religion part of your identity? Is religion part of your behaviors? Does religion inform your norms? Does religion inform how you handle a problem, how you seek out help? Does religion affect any of that? If the answer is yes, then if we take an inclusive definition of culture, if we're looking at culture from a wider perspective rather than simply ethnicity and race, then the answer is absolutely. Because culture is a bigger word. Urf, adat, taqalid, sunan, all of these things, these are traditions. So now the question has to become, well, if we're going to say, no, religion and culture are totally different, we have to define our terms. Otherwise we can't move forward. We can't communicate unless we define our terms. I believe that was Voltaire that said that. But here, what is Islamic psychology? What is psychology? What is Islam? Now if you're going to quote me Hadith Jibreel, please don't. That's not what I'm talking about. I mean, to you, what does Islam mean to you? You see, when our engineering brothers talk about problems, they have something called uncontained ambition, right? There's a process and a procedure for everything. But then you ask them, how do you feel today? They say, what do you mean? yeah, feelings, what? How did you enjoy that? Well, on a scale of 1 to 10, yeah, I think it was a 7 or a 9. You know, there has to be some sort of quantification. Just joking. I get 2 more, right? 2 more attacks, and then you could say, khalas, pull them off the stage. But here's the interesting thing. When we talk about emotions in the Muslim world, it's an awkward topic, is it not? Love. I mean, we know hate, don't we? Possibly because we don't truly understand love, so we're just so filled with hate. For the last how many years have all of our countries been defined by conflict, crisis, trauma, devastation, chaos? You don't think that has an effect on our psychology? You don't think that has an effect on who we see ourselves to be? On our thoughts, on our behaviors, on our emotions? If you told a Muslim couple, go see a marriage counselor, first thing they're thinking, if they have kids, no, we don't want the government to take our kids. Right away, immediately. See, a lot of times people will say things like, this community doesn't respect authority, or is afraid of authority. And you ask them, well, why? Why do you say that? What makes you think that? Well, because they, back home. It's all from back home. But that's not necessarily the case. And they're not afraid of the police. They're afraid of Child Family Services swooping in and taking the children. And that's because there's an ill understanding of the system. But regardless, it happens. Families will refuse to seek out help because they worry it's going to get worse. And so then now mom and dad are miserable, and they do nothing. And they stay miserable, and they still do nothing. And then their kid grows up in a miserable home. All this toxic environment. And then the kid learns something. He learns that my parents' love for me is conditional. If I get good grades, they love me. If I don't, they don't. If I memorize this para, this juz'u, if I do this, they love me. If I don't, they don't. So then when they grow up, what do you think they're going to be doing? What are they going to be seeking? Sure. Conditional love. And how do you think they're going to parent? Very simple stuff that just gets passed on. Now, when I say Islamic psychology, I focus on Islam first, then psychology. See, there's no shortage of discussion on Islamic psychology. This is not the first time you've heard about the concept, is it? Who's never heard about Islamic psychology before? Oh, mashallah. Also in the hard sciences, right? Yeah, of course. Just joking. Let me put it another way. Have you ever heard somebody saying, we need more counseling in the community? Imams need to be trained. Muslims don't want to see white people for counseling, for example. It's okay. You don't always have to be afraid to say the word white people, right? Have you heard that before? Why is that? You've heard it, you understand it, you know what I'm talking about, you know where I'm getting at. All this, I'm not the first person to speak about this. In fact, most times when people say, first time ever, that's scary. Because novelty sometimes is synonymous with ignorance. Like you just haven't read enough. Or synonymous with arrogance. You think, for whatever reason, you're the only one. If I sit here before you today, saying that I am the master of Islamic psychology, or I try to put any sense of importance on myself from all this, reject everything I say. Don't listen to a single word I'm saying because it's not true. But what I'm coming with today is, man, maybe this unifying concept called Islamic psychology will lead us to another place when it comes to mentoring and coaching and counseling and psychotherapy with younger Muslims and families. Maybe, just maybe. Maybe this starts a domino effect. That today somebody walks out of here saying, you know what? I think I'm going to look into this a little deeper. I think I'm going to read a few more articles. I think next time I read the seerah, I'm going to pay attention to what Mahdi was saying in terms of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ had the best counseling skills. But it's one thing to say that, it's another thing to show it, right? It's one thing for us to say Islamic psychology is important. And you know what? There has not been a single person, well maybe one, yeah, probably one, that didn't say this is such an important area of study. And the only one person is my dad. Because we joke around about it, right? Now he's a hard laborer. So we joke about psychology and this and that, but deep down inside he respects it and he loves it, right? And he knows how important it is for the community. Not for himself, but for the community. And that's what everybody else is, the similar passion. Not for me, I would never go see a psychologist, but I think she should, right? Especially couples. Brother, I need you to talk to my wife. Why? She's mentally ill. Why? What do you mean? It's like that joke with the psychologist and the teenager. You know, sometimes teenagers, they just talk too much, right? You know that saying about the millennials? They demand their right to speak, but they have nothing to say. Right, Ali? Okay, just joking. And again, if I offend you, I apologize. That's not my intention. But this teenager he knows everything. And he goes to a psychologist's office and he says, I just can't get along with my dad. What do you mean? Every time we talk, he explodes. He goes crazy. He gets so angry. And I need to control his anger. I'm like, wow, that's a big deal. I mean, that must be ruining your day, must causing you a lot of grief. Yeah, I can't get anything done. And I got this exam coming up, and I have to do this, and he doesn't understand how busy my life is. He doesn't treat me right. So he says, okay, I got this trick for you. Surefire thing. Every time you sense Your dad's about to get angry. I want you to take this special water. It's like a pure mixture of tap water, purified water, and Zamzam. And I want you to do this. I want you to swish it around in your mouth. She's like, okay, I'm going to do that. He comes back 2 weeks later and he says, MashaAllah, I don't know, it worked. It's like, really, it worked? Yeah, I don't know what you put in the water, but every time he was about to get angry, I did it and he stopped being angry. So he says, what's in the water? So the psychologist says, nothing. But you learned how to shut your mouth. That's all it takes. All it takes sometimes is for you to be quiet. Far too often we blame everybody else for our problem, but sometimes, you know what? We do need to go and seek out help. But again, today's not about help-seeking behaviors. Today's about, again, this unifying general concept. And why do it if it's not going to be accepted? So let me start off now, because I think what we said is we just have a little bit of discussion before we start the program until everybody came in. So officially, now we officially start the Islamic psychology lecture, okay? Why do we do this? Why study Islamic psychology? Give me some quick reasons why you're here so that I can at least make sure that you walk out of here having benefited. Really quickly, what do you hear? And if you hear it from somebody, just say pass. I want to hear everybody at least once. New topic. Okay, good. I'll come back to you when people don't talk. Who else? Go quick.
Using Islamic knowledge to do your daily things.
Islamic knowledge, okay. Let's call it Islamic knowledge applied. What else?
Applying Islamic knowledge to human behavior.
Okay. Behavior. Never emotions? Emotion's not part of behavior. Behavior is one thing. Emotions, they're connected, but it's not part of it. Okay. Sorry?
Good behavior, good emotion.
Yeah. So in one theory, it's good thoughts affect emotions, affect behaviors. That's what I use often. Cognitive behavioral therapy. Yes? From an Islamic reasoning? Oh, thank you. So Islamic rationales to psychology. Absolutely. Wonderful. Whew, thank God somebody said that. Yeah.
It's one of those things I don't know what I don't know. So just to get a baseline.
That is the best stage to be in as a student. It's called unconscious. It's called conscious incompetence. Very good state to be in. We all stay there, right? The danger is when you're unconsciously incompetent, right? But as you practice something long enough, you eventually become consciously competent. Unconsciously competent, sorry. Meaning you just do it naturally. Just comes natural. Very good, thank you. Who's next? Okay, learn and apply. Great.
Your practical experience with counseling people and combining that with your reflections and insights when studying, for example, this with your maths or other Islamic disciplines.
You should be giving this presentation then. What a great summary. Yes, thank you. I appreciate that. Inshallah, I will try my best. I will not, though, talk about real clients with you, especially because of the camera, unless you're in my training program and I'm supervising you or you're working together, then I share examples, because anonymity and confidentiality are the most important aspects of ethics, right? From a professional standard. Now, from an Islamic perspective, if we're going to integrate or modify psychology to meet the standards of Islamic rationales or whatever it is, not modify Islam. No Muslim would ever accept that. Modify your religion to fit some profession at a university? Come on. That's, it's insulting. Imagine telling a culture, change who you are so we can accept you. Who would ever do that? Right? But it happens. So, but the idea is when it comes to ethics, because if we're going to advance the professional practice of psychology, ethics must be part of that. What's another word for ethics in Arabic? A word you all know very well. Adab and akhlaq. That's your Islamic ethics. It's your akhlaqiyat, right? So, what are the signs of a hypocrite? 3 of them. Name 1. Speaks he lies. Okay. 2. Breaks a promise. And 3. No. Okay. إذا حدث كذب وإذا اؤتمن, if he's given a trust, betrays the trust. So when you're working with somebody as a psychologist, counselor, coach, or whatever, and you have this amana with them, this ethical obligation of confidentiality and anonymity, you've made a promise, you just broke the promise. You were trusted with their secrets and you just gave up their secrets. That's 2/3 of a hypocrite, right there. Now, we can just jump to the 3rd one right there and say, listen, man, you said that you were going to be ethical and professional in practicing with me, and you lied. So, if you want darkul asfali min an-nar, start exposing people's secrets. You want the lowest level of hellfire? By all means, expose people's secrets. That's what you really want. Or don't get into counseling. If you can't keep a secret, if you can't keep your clients not just anonymous, but confidential, but anonymous as well, meaning nobody can ever know who they are, which is why I won't share examples where you can identify the person. Could you imagine if I'm like, yeah, there's this young boy I used to work with, he has a gray shirt, he was wearing a gray shirt, sitting in the front row here, remember? I'm not going to tell you his name because I believe in confidentiality. You know what I mean? It doesn't work that way. People should feel comfortable sharing their secrets with you, right? And there's so much more that I'll bring in a little later on. Great. Going back, so practical experience, reflections, that's the extent of the stories that I'll be saying. I'll say, there was a case like this, but you will never ever know who that person is. And it's likely that the person would not be watching this because either they've passed away or other reasons. Okay? Which makes you think, is he talking about dead people? No, I won't be. Anyways. Next. What are you here for? I was forced to be here. Good, great. Thank you for being honest. You're his father? Okay, so why are you here then? Because I needed him to come here.
I came to know from one of my family friends.
Yeah, okay. Awesome.
So, just to know that is better understanding of individual role.
Yeah.
According to Islam.
Individual role.
And he is my son.
Grandson?
Yeah.
Friend's
Friends.
son, okay, yeah. I'm like, you don't look like a grandfather, mashallah. Why are you here then, friend?
I'm currently staying in Saudi, and I just want to see like the differences of what you're gonna say on Islamic psychology. Because in Saudi, I'm surrounded with Muslims, but here, it's everyone's diverse. So I'm just here to see what you're gonna say.
It's awesome. That's awesome. You got a good friend, man. So you're here to kind of compare between the two. Are you going into university soon?
No, I'm in high school.
You're in high school, but are you going into university soon?
No.
No?
Just
2 more years. Wow, and you already have this inquisitive mind. Okay, so let me tell you. In Canada, high school students don't really, no, just joking. That's great, keep that interest. And you know what, always make those comparisons. I just came back from Saudi about 3 weeks ago, I said, or 4 weeks ago. And I spend quality time with Sheikh Yusuf. I want to give him a shout out. Sheikh Yusuf is the head of the library, the Meccan library. So you know when you go for Umrah, you've gone for Umrah of course, you know the library that is claimed to be the house of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that area? Yeah, so by the buses. I spent some wonderful time with him, and this is the topic we talked about, Islamic psychology. So I've been talking to many scholars all over the world about Islamic psychology. I will get to that a little later on, but I'd like to hear your perception on this and perspective. Great, wonderful. So that's wonderful. Anybody else? Who else did we not? Yes.
Differentiation between lack of iman and psychological issues.
Is there a connection between lack of iman and psychological issues? I know exactly what he's talking about. I'm not trying to say I know everything. Astaghfirullah al-Azim. Depression. Can a Muslim be depressed? That's a huge question. All right. Okay. Sisters? You see it all over, right? Yeah. Okay. I didn't hear that last thing, so I'm trying to fill in the gaps. And this is my expertise in ineffective listening, right? I can't hear. General education. Excellent, excellent. So I can't disappoint. I just hope I don't disappoint. Ali, can you go to the back there and just relay whatever they're saying, just in case? Just in case somebody's shy to speak up. Anybody else? How and when to talk to kids? Ooh, that might be a tough one, but we'll try to bring it up inshallah. Ages and stages?
Kids are
18 and 13. All right. Okay. Who here wants to become a psychologist? Quite a few what? Okay, chances are they're behind that because they don't want a guy like you peeking in, so maybe just sit down. Yeah, there you go, right there. Listen effectively and just relay what the others is. Go ahead. If you're more comfortable writing it down, write it down and pass it up front, that's totally fine. So sister, if I understood correctly, depression and anxiety in 2 hours? Not even 2 hours. I spent 10 years learning this stuff. Okay, no, inshallah, I will try my best to address some of those points as well. Okay, good. How to deal with autistic? Yeah, that's going to require a specialized session. I can definitely not guarantee that I can talk about that. But I would definitely recommend speaking to whoever diagnosed them with autism. Make sure that they also provide you with resources, and there's the autistic foundations and there's associations and all that. Very good. They do wonderful work. Okay. Any final moments before we get rolling? Okay. Now my question to you is, who here is actually in the process of becoming a psychologist? Obviously none of the men. Barakallah feekum. Way to go. Another generation of loneliness in this field. Sisters, any? Are there any hands up? Okay, well then my goal is to convert you. It's that simple. So engineers, beware, all right? Doctors, beware, because psychology is coming. Bismillah. And the way I'm going to do it is, can you call something Islamic engineering? Can you call something Islamic physiology? Islamic medicine? Islamic medicine, yes. But al-ilaj al-nafs al-nabawi, is there such a thing? Is there such a thing as counseling according to the Quran and the Sunnah? Have you seen it happen? Who said yes? I doubt it. You've seen it happen?
No, I've heard and I read about it from Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the way that he was dealing with his wives, his children he raised up, and
Yeah.
actually companions, but unfortunately no one applied the ways.
Why do you think they're not applying it?
I'm not sure why.
Good. So keep that as your original question. Instead of saying people are not applying it, say I don't know why people are not applying it. That will start us on a pathway of, okay, maybe they don't know how and they need to be taught. Or maybe they have a problem in their daily life and they need to go see somebody about it. Like the imam, who would be trained in counseling according to the Sunnah and the Quran, right? So the idea here is, what you're talking about, sister, are characteristics and techniques. We're talking about a profession, a practice that you can be trained in and that you can be evaluated in. But you know the beauty of the Quran and the Sunnah, the Seerah, the Sahaba, the Tabi'een, the Tabi'een, the great people of the past, is that they all had two things that we can easily derive. One, they had akhlaqiyat. They had akhlaq that we can pull as characteristics. And they had techniques. So if somebody has the right characteristics and the proper techniques, they'll do wonders helping others. But if they have great akhlaq, but they have terrible techniques, what's going to happen? Or they have wonderful techniques, they're in a regulated profession, but they have no akhlaq, what's going to happen? Right? So sometimes what happens is people are acculturated to Islam, but not psychology. Or people are acculturated to psychology, but not Islam. Islamic psychology is about being acculturated in both. Now most of you know a lot more about Islam than most psychologists. Do you believe that? Yes, no?
Non-Muslim psychologists.
Yeah. Or maybe even Muslim psychologists, I don't know. But the idea is it's a very likely concept. It's a certainty that you know your problem better than anybody else. Nobody knows your problem like you do. Do you believe that? See, because you're used to the medical model. No, the doctor knows my problem. Brother Mahdi, motivate my child. Wrong question. You can't motivate children. You can't motivate teens. You got to help them motivate themselves. The reason why I'm doing what I'm doing here, one word, qubul, acceptance. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't accept what we do, what's the point? And the question becomes, how do we practice psychology or counseling or coaching or mentorship in such a way that the highest standards are met? The professional standards, the Islamic standards. How do we do that? Because that is the essence of what we're trying to do here. We're trying to make sure that everybody is practicing Islam better. And you can't practice Islam without akhlaq. The best of the believers is the one with the best akhlaq, correct? And there's no shortage of a hadith that we could talk about in terms of kindness. And these are all these characteristics of people with great akhlaq. You're going to find that the best Islamic psychologist, if there's such a thing, is going to be somebody with the best Islamic characteristics, coupled with the skills and the knowledge, the attitudes, the judgment and the diligence of the practice of psychology. But it's all about qubul. Who is it accepted by? If we're going to talk about Islamic psychology, then we have to understand something. Who regulates psychology? Are you familiar with regulated professions? Can I call myself an engineer? Who would come after me if I did? A PEGA, exactly. Does everybody know who a PEGA is? The regulatory body. A PEGA is responsible for all of the engineers here in Alberta, correct? Can I call myself a physician? Why not? Because I'm not, yes, so there's a personal, I'm not going to lie about my position, but who would come after me if I did? Physicians, right? Can I call myself a nurse? Can I call myself an electrician? Can I call myself a counselor? Can you call yourself a counselor? Can you? Who would come after you if you did? Nobody. It's not a regulated term in Alberta. Can you call yourself a psychologist? No. Who would come after you? Yes, the College of Alberta Psychologists, but they probably try to get you some counseling first, right? To see what's going on here, right? But the idea is this. The regulatory body is responsible for it's a self-regulated profession. The profession regulates itself by setting the educational, technical, and ethical standards, right? There is a contract with society that we will let you do, government will let you do, manage your own, make sure that membership is your responsibility. Because come on, do you really want some guy who just got into government deciding how to practice psychology and medicine and all this? Come on, let's be real here. The government would make a terrible caregiver. Are you kidding? No government official would agree. No, we'd make great parents. No. But these regulatory bodies, they protect the profession. Because the profession is supposed to protect the people. That's why these regulatory bodies hold themselves accountable. They make sure that their professionals have maintained a certain level, a certain standard of knowledge and education, right? There's all these credentials that need to happen. For those of you that are foreign workers whose credentials have not been accepted, sometimes those credentials might not be exactly what's needed, but it's much, much easier to err on the side of no, don't let anybody in, than let everybody in, right? Do you find that? There's always a shortage of a certain profession. Sometimes the college makes sure of that, keeps it more valuable. However, who regulates Islam? Can you call yourself a Muslim? What do you mean no? Of course you can. Anybody can call themselves a Muslim. Even if they're not a Muslim, they can call themselves a Muslim. I used to do some work in a prison system. And there's a new age religion. It's called Prislam. All right? Pillars are a little different. I won't go into too much detail, but there are some people there who have no clue even how to be a Muslim. But they know that as a Muslim, I'm afforded certain rights. I get a halal diet. So spicy chicken Tuesdays, yep, I'm in. Bacon and eggs Wednesdays, I'm in there too. So sometimes it's used for manipulative purposes. Have you ever heard of a Muslim who manipulates Islam for his own personal gain? Have you heard of a non-Muslim who manipulates Islam for his own personal gain? You got wackos and psychotics all over the world doing it. There's no regulation on that. They used to ask me in the prison, is this person a Muslim or not? Dumb question. Self-identified, especially in Canada. Nobody can ever come and say you're Muslim or you're not. We don't do that. If somebody just shows up, you've never seen them before, you're not going to say, excuse me, sir, can I see your membership card? when I would go to the Masjid al-Aqsa, they'd ask, are you Muslim? Because there's certain times that non-Muslims are not allowed in or whatever. I mean, again, the rare exception. But the idea is there are certain times. I'd say, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. You know what I mean? So there's certain things about Muslims that you can tell if this guy's a Muslim or not. But there's no regulation on it. Since there's no regulation on Islam, there cannot be regulation on Islamic psychology. So what ends up happening is anybody who knows anything a little bit about Islam, they can easily talk about Islamic psychology. And some are doing it. And you know what? They're doing a wonderful job. The only problem is they lack the Islamic piece. Not them as individuals, them as academics, which means if you wanted to regulate the profession, the knowledge of Islam would be very, very, very low, but the knowledge of psychology would have to be very, very, very high. Which means what? Would our beloved, do you call him Sheikh Ali here? Ali Nasser, do you call him Sheikh Ali or Imam Ali? Sheikh Ali? Would our beloved Sheikh Ali fit into that category? He's a very knowledgeable Muslim. He understands society very well. He's got degrees, Sharia. But he's not a psychologist, so he'd be out. I'm saying, no, hold on a second. Let's turn the tables around for a second. You have to be acculturated and understand Islam before you go down this line. That doesn't mean that you can't counsel Muslims. A'udhu billah. No, of course. There are some people who have no clue about Islam that do a better job with a Muslim than somebody who knows a lot about Islam. For many, many reasons, and that we'll get into some other time. But for today, Islamic psychology begins with Islam. The psychology of Muslims, different story. But Islamic psychology, it's either Sunnah based or Sunnah infused. Those are the terms that I use for it. The reason I said Islamic psychology at the title today, to prove my point, it's not regulated. Now when you read registered psychologist underneath, actually most of you know me anyway, right? So you probably thought, okay, yeah, we know, we've heard his khutbahs, whatever it is, so that's different. But if I went to a city or a town that I knew nobody in, and I said Islamic psychology, what is the first question they're going to ask? How much about psychology does he know? Very rare will they say, what has he studied? Where has he studied Islam? But they'll want to know about the psychology piece. So that's just the way it is. Because why? Because psychology is regulated. Why? Because it's dangerous to practice therapy without knowing anything. It's dangerous to give people solutions that you think will help them. It's dangerous to diagnose when you don't have the right to diagnose. Even more dangerous to tell somebody something is haram when it's not. Do you see what I'm getting at here? The more we move forward with this notion of becoming better Muslims, we become better psychologists, better counselors, better coaches, better mentors, better parents, better friends, because there's a basis there. That's what we want to kind of keep pulling out. Now, if we look to the future, do you remember the debate about regulating imams? Did anybody remember that debate? They wanted to regulate imams, right? Why? How many people thought that was a good idea in the room? Show of hands, who thinks regulating imams is a good idea? In Canada. Okay. And who thinks it's a bad idea? Okay. And who doesn't understand the question? Okay. And who has absolutely no concept of answering a question? Because I'm asking you, give me something, man. Or do you want me to who wants me to get to the point?
So what is the terms and conditions for regulation?
Thank you. Thank you for saying that. What are the terms? Who's regulating? Based on what? What is the educational requirements? And if that's the case, then who's teaching it? And if that's the case, then where's this university? Or will they even need a university degree? If that's the case, fine. What about the technical aspects? What about the structural aspects of it? What about the ethical standards? What about past history? All of these factors. So when somebody says let's regulate, yeah, sure, of course. My response right away is wonderful. But I also believe in nothing about us without us. Regulating a people? Are other clergy regulated? Yes. Now when we talk about being a professional, anybody can call themselves a professional, right? But a regulated professional is a whole nother world. I'm saying that if we're really going to talk about Islamic psychology, then let's begin with the vision. Not just have a university teaching one course on Islamic psychology, but imagine Islamic psychology being regulated. If you're going to say al-tib al-nafs al-nabawi or al-ilaj al-nafs al-nabawi, if we're going to call it that, if we're going to call it sunnah-infused psychology or therapy, then we better be ready to meet the highest of ethical standards, technical standards, and educational standards. Let's at least start there. If we never reach it, so be it. إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ. But at least try. At least in 10 years from now, every single one of our children, if they need help, they have it. All of these stigmas are overcome. Because let's face it, which one of us has never had a problem before? Imagine I asked you, show of hands, who's had a problem? No, just joking. Wouldn't ask that, right? We all have problems. We all have sadness in our hearts. So, following up on your concept, so what are the terms? What are the conditions? Let's just shift focus from structure to concepts now, okay? So the structure of Islamic psychology looks this way in terms of, well, what is it? Is it an institution? Is it a this? Is it a that? How do I become whatever it is they're professing? Is it, is there such thing as a Christian psychology? Is this a faith-based thing? Is there such thing as a Pakistani psychology? An Arab psychology? An African psychology? What does it mean to be this or that? All these things, these are conversations. Actually, sorry, these are research questions. These are things that can take years to answer. But right now, the goals of psychology, the objectives. I'm a very action-oriented therapist, but I'm also an action-oriented individual. I like action, I like moving. Let's do something. Sometimes recklessly. Maybe I should reclaim that. Not recklessly as in endangering other people's lives, but it's kind of like, hey, let's do an event, let's do an event. If there's no harm in it, boom, let's do it. But what is the objectives of psychology? What do you think? If somebody is a great psychologist, what can they do? In your opinion, because I want to get an understanding, I want to get a clear understanding of your understanding of psychologists. What can a good psychologist do?
He brings out of you what you don't want to say.
Bring out of you what you don't want to say. Okay. Like an interrogator. Okay. What else?
Find the real cause behind any issues.
Find the real cause behind an issue. So a problem solver. All right.
Trying to help you to show some empathy.
Trying to help you by them showing empathy. Very good. Yeah. So they have empathy. So there's some characteristics. What else?
Try to be in their shoes.
Try to.
Well,
Yeah. Empathy. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Okay. So they can reframe things. Sorry.
give solutions.
Give solutions. Okay.
I guess we're focusing on clinical psychologists as opposed to academic psychologists. But with a clinical psychologist, they're going to use a form of therapy to assist the client with whatever problem that they're dealing with.
Okay.
It's cognitive behavior.
So they're going to use a form of therapy. So some sort of theoretical underpinning. So everything they do is grounded in some sort of scientific process. Okay. Assuming. Okay, and we're saying good. We're saying top standards. Wonderful. Anything else? What about read your mind? But when we talk about
Yeah, they understand that each age is certain concern certain issues.
yeah, ages and stages, right?
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. What else? So none of you said they read minds. None of you said any of this stigma stuff, right? The stuff that it's kind of like, well, they're not magicians. You know what I mean? Not wizards. And sometimes all a psychologist is an effective listener. And as you said, grounding problems into some sort of a foundation, right? Describing thought, emotions, and behavior. Explaining sometimes why these behaviors occur. Why is it that every time a child falls down on the ground or hurts himself, we hit the table? Ever see that happen? Show of hands, who sees that happen? So your kid is running and then boom, hits the table. And we pick him up and the kid's crying, we say, did the table, right? And then we ask ourselves, why is it that when children or young Arabs or Muslims or Africans or East Indians or Bangladeshis or whatever, why when they are hurting, they want to hurt other people? Is it possible that they take comfort in hitting other people? Have we conditioned children to comfort themselves with it? Because what does a child only want? They just want you to comfort them, right? They want you to hug them, bring them closer. That's what they really need. But you added that extra step. And so what you've done is, by process of association, you've associated the hitting with comfort. So classical conditioning, for those of you that have taken at least a psychology introduction to psychology course, that's what they call classical conditioning. So sometimes what happens is psychologists will explain certain behaviors based on a theory. But that's not necessarily always true either. So for example, why is it that sometimes, as the example that we gave earlier, that some young Muslims, for example, are always seeking approval from other people? Could it be because dad didn't show unconditional love as a child? No, everything was conditional. And so this person doesn't feel comfortable in their own skin until they're accomplishing something. And so now you have these overachievers. Wonderful, great, overachieve. But what happens when they get a 94% on an exam? They go home and dad says, where's the other 6%? Do you think they'll start cheating to get the other 6%? Do you think they'll start cheating to get ahead? So what have we effectively done? Now, when we look at another aspect, that's predicting people's behaviors. How old's your boy? 3 years old. If he didn't have that cookie in his hand or that snack, hey buddy, salam alaikum, what's your name? Nice. Adam, mashallah, Allah khalilak ya. If he didn't have that in his hand, can you predict that he would throw a fit if he's hungry? Can you predict when he's about to go to sleep, when he's tired? How? Right? Whatever it is, you start identifying those factors, right? So sometimes what psychologists do, they'll predict certain behaviors before they happen, not because they're mind readers or anything, but because it's patterns of behavior, right? You can predict when a structure is failing. You don't have to wait to see it fall to predict it, right? We don't have to be psychologists or even scientists at all to know that if our youth lose their identity, our community's finished. We're done. They're the indicator species in our community. If we start losing our youth, good luck. Mind you, we'll always have volunteers in a mosque. Always. Because so as long as there's Isha prayer, somebody's going to clean up that mess in the back. And so often what happens is mosques forget about retention strategies with youth. And they look at them more as unpaid labor. So we can predict retention. And you can predict people quitting and turnover. You can predict who's going to come to your event and who won't. But psychologists are not the only ones that are studying human behavior, right? But again, modifying and improving behavior so that people can live better lives. Essentially, helping somebody increase their happiness and decrease their misery. That's some other goals. So, given all those goals, is there anything un-Islamic about psychology? I have a lot of young students who've taken their first psychology course, and they come and they say, Astaghfirullah, I think it's haram for me to be in this class. Now, I'm not going to say, no, don't worry, it's not. I'm not qualified to say that. Even if I were, I wouldn't. Because I want to know where they're coming from. What do they think is haram about it? And let's see if we can manage this problem. And alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, I've got a slew of scholars standing behind me in terms of supporting this type of work. Why? Because I believe in this notion of Islamic psychology. I believe in it very, very wholeheartedly. But I believe that Islam has to come first. And again, counseling Muslims, different story. But Islamic psychology, or as I like to call the practice of it, Sunnah-based counseling or Sunnah-infused counseling. Sunnah-based counseling is basically modifying psychology so that it fits the rationale of Islam. But it's rooted in psychology. And no big deal, so as long as you stay within the parameters. But however, Sunnah-infused counseling is starting from the philosophy of change and the understanding of knowledge, the ontology and the epistemology and all of these factors that PhD students all need to know, right? What is the nature of knowing? How do you know something, right? All this philosophical stuff. Now somebody might come and say, Astaghfirullah, akhi, don't go into that. But you got to be very careful, because the scholars do go into that. And if you're going to be a scholar, then you got to master these topics. Otherwise, what starts to happen? Our young, aspiring future leaders and scholars, they go into university and they're so scared of everything. And really, it's because they're just ignorant. They just don't know. They haven't studied enough. But again, what I mostly talk about are psychological theories, but they're modified to make sure that it's appealing to an Islamic audience. The rationale is very clear, right? You mentioned CBT. You're familiar with CBT, right? So CBT, the target of intervention is thoughts, correct? So if somebody has these intrusive thoughts that just keep coming up, they can't stop thinking about something. There's techniques in therapy. One is called the thought-stopping technique. Very simple. You take an elastic band, and every time the thought comes, you snap. And you're tapping into this internal system that will help you stop those thoughts. It'll stop in the moment, possibly for a few seconds, if that, and then come back again. But the idea is it's a technique. Now, what if you're thinking about a loved one and you keep arguing with them in your mind? You've heard this example before? Have I shared this with you before? Okay. How many of you are married? Show of hands. All right. I think enough to give this example. How many of you, okay, you're either married or you have parents, correct? All right. So let's say you're thinking about your mom, your dad, your husband, your wife, whatever it is, and you start arguing with them in your own mind. Ever happen? You start arguing. It's back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. You're saying something, they're responding. In your mind, they're responding, correct? And then you start doing something called catastrophizing, which means things get really, really bad really, really quickly. So what do? This is where a modified version of CBT comes into place. I would say, well, there's a hadith where the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ says that an angel has been created for one purpose: to make dua, or to say Ameen when you make dua for your brother or sister in their absence. Correct? You know this hadith? So you make dua for your wife or your husband, and an angel says Ameen. وَلَكَ كَمِثْلِهِ, right? Ameen, and for you as well. So the angel's making dua for you. Correct? Step one, if you have these negative thoughts about a loved one, make dua for them. Because if you make dua for them, what's going to happen? The angel's going to say, and for you as well. And when you're arguing, and this is where the spiritually modified approach comes in at a higher level. Not just simple stuff. I mean, we got to go higher than what's out there in the literature. When you are arguing in your own mind, who are you really arguing with? Or, what's the definition of waswasa? So who are you arguing with? So when you make dua for that person, every time you think about that person, you make dua for them, is shaitan going to keep reminding you? Do you see my point? Now, the reason why this is not an actual intervention is because there are no studies using these interventions and asking, did they work? There's no effectiveness studies, there's no efficacy studies, there's no random clinical trial, there's none of that. Comparing that level of intervention. There is, in terms of spiritually modified interventions, 100%, and they seem to work. But what some of the studies show is they seem to work in the short term, not long term. But I find maybe it's worth developing these interventions, you know, even if it's not for research, to train you. At least 20 interventions. You should each have at least 20 techniques that you can use at a drop of a hat. Easily, quick. Here's another one. You're talking to a friend of yours. They don't know what they want to do. Have you ever had this happen? You're talking to somebody. They start talking about the problem. You offer a solution. They say, yeah, but no. Then you get another solution. Yeah, but no. Another solution. Yeah, but no. Yeah, but no. Yeah, but no. Yeah, but nothing you offer, they're taking. Then you get frustrated. It's a wrong style of counseling. Many of you said they give solutions. No, they don't. They should help you find the solution that's already within you. That's what I train my mentors and my coaches and the counselors in, something called solution-focused therapy. Which means, anytime you're working with somebody, you need to find the exception to the problem. When was there a time that was going to happen but it didn't? And what were you doing during that time? Or you find previous solutions. You know, have you ever dealt with this before? Yes, I have. And did it work? Yeah, it did. What were you doing during then? What did you try then? Do you see what I'm getting at? Do you see how easy it becomes now to deal with a problem? And third, you should always be asking about a preferred future. What's another word for a preferred future? An Arabic word. Amal. Thank you. I was hoping somebody would say niyyah and then I could say, a little bit more because that's it. But amal, exactly. Hope. What's the opposite of hope? In Arabic. Al-Yas. Despair. How many times do people say al-Yas means depression? You're an educated bunch. But the reason why a lot of people say, you're a Muslim, you can't be depressed. They don't mean depressed. They mean hopeless. They mean having ya'as. They mean giving up totally. Now somebody might say, oh wow, you guys are pretty harsh. What do you mean? Could you imagine saying, oh, if you're depressed, that means you're not a Muslim, or you have a weakness in your iman? My dear brothers and sisters, be very, 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 how many varies is that? Very, very, very careful to never say something is haram if it's not. That's an act of kufr. It's very dangerous. This is why for me, I have no problem challenging the entire field of psychology or the field of social work, right? I have the credentials to do so. And if I make a mistake, there's not really that much consequences. So as long as I don't hurt anybody, I can say, oh, I disagree with this or that. Who am I to disagree with anybody anyway, for that matter? But the idea is, I can disagree with that and sleep at night. But I can never ask any of these young people. They're always asking those, you know, with youth, they just want somebody to blame. So they'll ask about, can I eat halal meat? Can I eat at McDonald's? Can I do this? Can I do that? They just want an excuse. And if you give them the answer, even if you say, listen, I'm not giving any fatwas, and then they'll ask, what's usually the question? Yeah, we don't want you to give us an Islamic answer, but what do? You know what I'm saying? So they try to get there. I get terrified. I'm not qualified to give Islamic rulings, but I can modify psychology to make sense to Muslims. So that when Muslims are practicing therapy or coaching or counseling or mentoring, that they could say, aha, this will work. Even if there's a non-Muslim counselor, they should be able to use these skills with Muslims. That's counseling Muslims. Islamic psychology, we're saying we want to build an institution, a regulated profession. And if we don't reach that, at least we've strived for ihsan, standards of ethics. If you're not competent to do something, don't do it. And I guarantee you, if we sat today, if we said, okay, you know what, let's go for a retreat, and we're going to take 20 or 30 of you, and all we're going to do is we're going to talk about every single point in psychology, and everybody is going to give their comment on how that somehow relates to Islam. You would have hundreds of ideas. Have you ever read something and say, oh, wait a minute, there's something like that we have in Islam? And I don't mean, Adil Qarni wrote the book, la tahzan on that. That's not what I mean. I mean that you yourself can analyze and modify certain things to say, that makes sense. Keep doing that. And write it down and share it with others. But the idea here is competence is not just making sure that people are satisfied with what you're saying. You see, there's a huge difference between counseling and giving advice. Anybody know the difference? This is the difference that I say, so I don't expect you to know it, but I mean, giving advice is saying the right things. Counseling is responding to the right things, right? And that requires, oh, I thank you. You gave me a car? Barakallahu feek. Counseling is responding to the right things. Why respond to the right things? I want to give you now, let's see. New topic is good. Relate this to Islam now. Okay, practical application. One of the Imams said, all good manners are derived min arba'ati ahadith, from 4 ahadith. Okay? That's where we're going to start here, right? Remember, by the way, this is an introduction, okay? Which means there's many topics that have been talked about. In longer sessions and courses, they get addressed more deeper. I have a Sunnah-based counseling skills course. It's several levels. I have a Muhajir Ansar or a Reach One, Teach One mentorship training, several levels. A lot of this stuff gets dealt with there. I'm just giving you the bullet points, right? Because ultimately the job of a counselor is to make sure you come back. No, just joking. I'm just joking. That's actually the goal of session 1, is make sure they come back for session 2. But the goal of session 2 is make sure you find out when they're not going to come back anymore, okay? Get determination. So, 4 ahadith that summarize akhlaq. And we've already established, if you're going to be an Islamic counselor, coach, mentor, psychologist, then Islam has to come first. So, okay, great. Let's start with building the Islamic aspect and modifying to say, you know what? Okay, I'm going to focus on these 4, and I'm going to at least have the foundation of being a great counselor from an Islamic perspective. What would those 4 ahadith be? And you know the beauty of this is? In most of the presentations where I've talked about this, if you sit long enough, everybody gets it. They answer these. It's not like some far off hadith. It's there. What's number 1? No specific order. What's 1? La darar wa la dirar? No, but that is a great, what's it called? Are you a physician? Right, got it, okay. Do no harm, that's your business. You got to cut people open, man. So we don't expect you. So for psychologists and counselors and all that stuff, do no harm is not enough. That has to go more, right? For yourself, you're dealing with so much, you know what I mean? Calculated risk, right? So, what's another one? And definitely, these are the hadith that we need to start writing. Somebody needs to write down or whatever it is, so that maybe these should belong in the ethical code of Islamic counselors. If you're going to build a code of ethics, if you want people to have ethical standards, you have to have a code of ethics. La darar wa la dirar has to be one of them, definitely. Do no harm. But these 4 are specific based on what the Imam said. What are those 4? Innama al-a'malu bin-niyat is great, but it's not one of those. Sorry. Al-Muslim man salim al-Muslimin min lisanihi wa yadih, right? Okay. Protected from their hand and their tongue. This is a very, very, very scary hadith, sister. Our children are Muslims or no? Are they safe from our hands and our tongues? Does that make us Muslims? We gotta be careful, right? It's a scary hadith. The answer is no in terms of these 4, or else we'd all be, in big trouble. But yes, this is a great hadith that needs to be implemented. You gotta protect people from your hands and your tongue. So, based on that hadith, go a little deeper, go a little wider, okay? If you're not harming somebody, what's a principle or a policy that you can implement to make sure you never hurt anybody with your tongue? You never say something that's so incompetent that you've caused irreparable damage in this person's life. Yeah. Remember, all akhlaq, 4 hadith. Summarized in these 4 hadith. Remember, again, a perspective from an imam. Now, you're going to say more, but these 4, you'll get it when we say it. Yes? La taghdab. Very great. Very good. Don't get angry. Don't get angry. Now, it's one thing to say to somebody, don't get angry. But when you're angry, can you stop? Of course not. But when you're frustrated, can you stop? Do you know when you're frustrated? Yourself. Can you identify yourself? So there's something called the anger triangle. I was going to draw a triangle, but you know what a triangle looks like. Relaxed, frustrated, angry. Somebody says something to you while you're relaxed, it doesn't bother you as much. But if they say the exact same thing while you're frustrated, what's going to happen? You're going to get angry. And if they say the exact same thing while you're angry, have you ever heard it happen? You try to give them Islamic advice at the wrong time, and you see the worst in people. But that's not their fault necessarily, it's yours. Because you should have known better. That's not the right time to try to challenge somebody. أنت بتدعي إنك مسلم؟ تحكي هيك? You know what I mean? You got to be careful. And you hear it from problems and families and stuff like that. And you know, when people are angry, just stay out of their way. They're looking for a fight. I had a guy on my way here, pulled over, I prayed on the road. The guy was swearing at me. Yeah, I did the typical, you know, videotaped it and stuff, but I don't like publicizing those guys. I don't feel like a victim. I'm not. He was swearing. Okay, great, wonderful. So I just say, hey, you okay, man? He turned away, right? Swearing while I'm praying. Probably knows that I can't stop and say, you know, shh, Allahu Akbar, you know, I can't. He was swearing, fine. I'm not angry, I'm relaxed, I'm okay. He's looking for a fight. I mean, I called the police because I thought he was drunk. They didn't answer, so it's their problem. But the idea is, when people are angry, just stay out of their way. They want to suck you in. If you have an angry spouse or child or whatever, just stay away from them. Just watch what happens. Now, if it's an abusive anger, that's a different story. Get help. But the idea is, لا تغضب. If we can manage our anger, what is the promise for the person that manages their anger? What's the ayah in the Quran? All right. Now you can manage your anger, but can you forgive them? Now sometimes forgiveness is not for them, it's for you. And there's different levels of forgiveness, different types of forgiveness. But that does not get included when we talk about forgiveness. La taghdab starts it all off. But imagine how many courses can be taught on anger management from an Islamic perspective. How many modules can be built into our schools, our Islamic schools, our regular schools, so that the counselor dealing with this really angry Muslim kid calls an actual counselor, doesn't call the police. Oh, I think he's a radical. Why? He's angry. Why? Dad wouldn't give him a spinner. Oh. You know what I mean? Like, I've seen things like that happen. Incompetence upon incompetence upon incompetence. But you shouldn't be incompetent. If you're going to help somebody, consider this your first orientation to training. La taghdab. So when you're helping somebody and you start getting frustrated with them, you got to remember, la taghdab. Calm down. Have you ever went to somebody for help and they just made it worse? This is the epitome of help back home, is it not? You go for help, they just make it worse. Now they're in the fight too. It's like, what? You needed to reflect calm. You needed to be the one that shows grace and kindness. You know the hadith. Inna rifq, that rifq, kindness, does not get attached to something illa zana, and it's taken away from something illa. So the idea here is kindness, generosity, all of these are characteristics of somebody who's able to manage their anger, or vice versa. But the idea is it's part of this whole repertoire of what we call counselor characteristics. What are the characteristics of somebody who would make an Islamic counselor? Well, at least bare minimum, he has a good, or she has a good understanding. Chances are it's going to be a she anyway, but has a good understanding of la taghdab. What's number 2? Thank you. I'll come back to you if nobody knows it. I'll come right back to you. I'm actually just, and the reason why is because I'm more interested in your thought process. This, what you're doing right now. You're racking your brain. You know what I mean? Everything. What did they tell me? What did my husband say to me that other time when I was angry, when I was upset? What did my wife say? What does she keep saying? What is it? What is it? What is it? Right? I want you to rack your brain. I want you to get into this idea that every single thing that you do has an impact on other people and has a consequence in the sama. Allah's watching it. Qubul, remember, it's accepted or not. You fasted 30 days of Ramadan, accepted or not accepted. You akmaltul iddah, you completed the days, and then you kabbartullah on what He has given you, and you did your takbirat, and you visited family, and you maintained family ties, you did all that. And here you are, about a month later or so. Has it been a month since Eid? No. Yeah. 2 weeks, yeah, okay. When did I have Eid? I'm just joking. 2 weeks since then, was it accepted? Man sama Ramadan, man qama Ramadan, imanan wa ihtisaban. They believed that they got the reward. Did you have that? Was it accepted? One of the indicators, are you still doing it? I don't mean fasting, but having that taqwa that you developed during Ramadan, is it still there? Or did you go through the post-Ramadan dip? That transition, by the way, is a very difficult one. In fact, if you were to go see a physician and they were to use the ICD codes, or you were to go to see some psychiatrist, they were to use the DSM-5, you would probably be diagnosed with an adjustment disorder. Why? Because you would start off and you talk about your problem. I don't know, I just don't feel right. Well, what's been happening in your life? I don't know, okay, are you, and they would go through the checklist and they would go through all of it. And the way the tree or the diagram is, right, the flow chart, no, yep, no, yep, no, differentiate, no, is this, is it, no, no medical condition. If all else fails, it's an adjustment disorder. And that's probably what you'd be diagnosed with. But what is it? Yes, because you're not feeling comfortable in this new phase. How many of you, when you first came to Canada, it was so exciting, but then all of a sudden, boom, reality kicked in. Honeymoon period's over. Married couples. Or unfortunately, a lot of people who are engaged. Everybody thinks you're so happy, you're on cloud 9 and everything, but that's when problems start to begin. Because you're fighting and you don't know who to talk to. What, are you going to talk to your mom? You begged her to let you get married. Talk to your dad? He's not going to understand. So they go through these problems. So when they turn to you, you need to understand that transitions are always difficult. Are you still doing what you did in Ramadan? And was it accepted? When you think about helping other people, will it be accepted? Knowing Wallahu fi aun al-abd, ma kan al-abdu fi auni akhi. I mean, again, the only thing I ever want to do, I want to help you to help them to help themselves. Now that's just my thughra. You know the hadith. كلكم على ثغرة من ثغر الإسلام فلا يؤتين من قبلك. Man, if you got a responsibility, you got to be the best in that responsibility. You got to be, you don't need to be told, be the best physician. You don't need to be told that kind of stuff. But when it comes to helping other people, we just need to remember, we have to have good akhlaq. لا تغضب. Number one. All these characteristics, have those, you're going to be okay. And inshallah, it'll be accepted. That was a nice rabbit hole, wasn't it? Let's get out from there. Let's come back. Number 2. Al-sabr wal-hilm. Again, you're talking about these great characteristics. I mean, sabr, come on. There is, wallahi, I've been thinking about, okay. If there's something called Islamic psychology, then under that big banner of Islamic psychology are going to be different interventions. And sabr therapy would be one of those interventions. So you would, al-ilaj bis-sabr, you would focus solely on sabr and all of its conditions and all of that stuff, right? Now, some people would probably say, well, that's everything. No, it's not everything. Because sabr therapy looks different than tawbah therapy. Which looks different from afu, which looks different from all these different things. Treating takabbur would look different than treating impulsivity. Both of them are things you should always avoid, right? Because if you're impulsive, what is warathat al-ajal? What does ajal bring about? An-nadam. Usually, impulsivity leads to some sort of regret. I should have waited. Too quick. No, I don't mean you're playing a video game and all of a sudden you just jump too quickly. I mean like, man, you got angry so quickly? Why didn't you just hold off? Don't send that email yet. Try it. Next time you're going to send an angry email, لا تغضب. Delay it for 20 minutes. Then come back to it, see what happens. Or when you want to call her and tell her what you really feel. Or you know what, that's it. Enough is enough. I'm going to tell him, and you send a text. Don't. Hold off. Protect yourself from yourself. لا تغضب. Okay? Sabr. وما أدراك ما الصبر. You know what I mean? I mean, the famous hadith on sabr is what? Okay, sabr and anger put together is what? Do I need to pull out $50 and tell you? Tap into your external motivation? Ali's like, he doesn't even have $50. 5. It's just 8, so. MashaAllah. Too long. Just joking. But yes, of course. It is right, of course. That if you're able to manage, if you're able to be patient and be kind, man, you got Jannah guaranteed. The best of homes is the one that there's kindness in it, right? But we're talking about a specific hadith. What about إِنَّمَا الصَّبْرُ عِنْدَ صَدْمَةَ الْأُولَى? You know the story, right? So a lady is crying over a grave. She's so distraught. I mean, she's distressed. She's grieving. And the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, out of his kindness, inquires. He goes to her. And he says, Ittaqillah wasbiri. Fear Allah. And not fear Allah, sorry, be conscious of Allah. Taqwa of Allah means a lot more than we think it does, right? Let's be careful from our translations. Pride does not mean takabbur. Arrogance is takabbur. Pride means izzah. But because of the language translation, being proud is haram. Because of the language translation, being depressed is haram. You see what we're doing to ourselves? We're importing wrong information. So we got to be very, 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 very careful. If you were to pick up the book on Islamic medicine, our physician here, you would read through it and you'd be like, no, I can't. This would not hold up to the scrutiny of the profession here. The regulated body would not say, they couldn't accept that as a book that you would be teaching. But that's not because the information in it is wrong. It's because the way it was delivered might have been wrong. There might have been error in the way the author or scholar wrote it. And remember, we have a policy when it comes to scholars. لا نقدس ولا ندنس. Like we don't, no scholar is above error. Now I'm not qualified to say who's in error. No, a'udhu billah, definitely not. And nor are most people when they start to look down on scholars. What do they know? So we got to be very careful with the translation. But again, he says to her, taqillah wasbiri. Now, what does taqwa of Allah feel like? You fasted 30 days, لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ. What did it feel like to have that moment between you and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? that consciousness that Allah is there. When the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ and Abu Bakr as-Siddiq were traveling, what am I saying, traveling? When they were seeking asylum in Medina, on perhaps the most decisive day in Islamic history, in the Hijrah, and the Prophet ﷺ turns to Abu Bakr as-Siddiq and he says, Inna Allah ma'ana. That kindness, would you not define that as taqwa? That consciousness that Allah is with you? So I want you to imagine it from that perspective, the emotional domain of taqwa. Not the fear Allah, but the consciousness of Allah. That moment, that special moment that you had with your Creator. Perhaps, again, I'm only implying, perhaps, He's telling her, have that. Have taqwa and be patient. Now, do you really think the Prophet yelled it at her? Honestly, like, let's just do a little bit of exploration here. How do you think the Prophet said it? In what tone of voice? As you scan through all of the different tones, loud, soft, gentle, this and that, you choose the right one. The one that you know the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ to be. بِالْمُؤْمِنِينَ رَؤُوفٌ رَحِيمٌ. And what does she say to him? She says, إِلَيْكَ عَنِّي, right? But do you think she said it that way? Do you really think she's so distraught and she said, إِلَيْكَ عَنِّي? You know what I mean? Like you know how when the old school cartoons, like when we read the hadith, we read it with no emotion whatsoever? Do you really think she said, إِلَيْكَ عَنِّي? You don't know what I've been through. Or, إِلَيْكَ عَنِّي? Get away from me! With such deep passion and emotion. She's distraught. Remember, the anger triangle. She's already angry. She's already distraught. So what's said to her while she's angry, boom, verbal aggression. She was aggressive. And then what happens? No matter how difficult her day was, when she found out that she said it to the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, all of that disappeared. Now there's another lesson here. Anytime you're going through a problem, you're not going through the problem 24 hours a day. I mean, if it's a medical condition, that's a different story. But psychological problems do not usually occur 24 hours a day. There's exceptions. Now, yeah, you might be depressed for a very long time, but for a diagnosis of clinical depression, it doesn't have to be 24 hours a day. Ever have that happen? Somebody's like, they're depressed? What do they have to be depressed about? Material things don't make everybody happy. Or when you say they're depressed, look at them. They look happy now. But in fact, depression is one of the hardest disorders to really see in a person. However, she finds out it was the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, and she says, Ya Rasulullah, like, now how do you think she's talking? The emotion in there. Do you really think she's saying, yeah, you know, back what happened over there, just don't worry about it? Or was she pleading and begging? This is an emotional moment. And he says to her what? إِنَّمَا الصَّبْرُ عِنْدَ الصَّدْمَةِ الْأُولَى. But how do you think he said it? Did he yell at her? Did he curse her? So the next time somebody comes to you distraught, لا تغضب. Not you. Don't add fuel to the fire. Don't make it worse. And remember that It's not personal. They're not intentionally attacking you. But again, if you're not ready for it, don't do it. So that's, la taghdab is one. You said sabr. That's the rabbit hole we went down. Let's come back up again. Number 2 is what? So, Sheikh Ali, actually I'm not going to put you on the spot on this one, just in case he already knows the answer, so we won't ask him. For a hadith, all of akhlaq, and what we're talking about in terms of akhlaq, just as a summary, is that these are counselor characteristics. So if we're going to talk about Islamic psychology, not just as a course, but as a regulated profession, it requires educational requirements, ethical standards, and technical standards. All this stuff has to be there. So we're talking about something huge, massive, years upon years upon years. But the idea is here, at least there needs to be some sort of counselor characteristics if we're going to have our counseling accepted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because after all, we're about the qubul, we're about the acceptance, right? So what's another hadith? Is that an okay summary? And we acknowledge that engineers don't address their emotions well. Oh, where'd he go? You're still here, so you'll. And we also acknowledge that Islam is not regulated. So anybody can call themselves a Muslim. And unfortunately, anybody can also call themselves a counselor. So to call yourself an Islamic counselor, nobody's coming after you. But if I call myself an engineer, the Apega brothers, I'm finished. Right? What's number 2? Do you want me to give you a hint? من كان يؤمن بالله واليوم الآخر. Oh, mashallah. فليقل خيرا أو ليصمت. Right? There's number 2. Could you imagine if all you ever spoke was good? So you're counseling somebody, and you're only saying good things. But what does that mean, saying good things? Remember, the difference between advice and counseling is very, very clear. Advice, saying the right things. So when somebody comes to Sheikh Ali, Sheikh Naveed, or Sheikh Hassan, Imam Hassan, or whoever, for advice, for a fatwa, for information, it should be quick, 5-10 minutes. Now if the person starts arguing, then again, that's a counseling issue, because they have that kathratul jidal, right? And arguing for the sake of arguing leads to a very big problem called doubt. And doubt, lack of certainty, is the source of anxiety. See where it all starts to come to play here? So now you're not dealing with somebody's fatwa question, you're dealing with anxiety. And if you're not trained in dealing with anxiety, try to refer as quick as possible. So if somebody comes to you asking a religious question, and this is a module in the Counseling Imams course, but the idea is if somebody comes to you asking an Islamic question, keep it structured and focused on the question itself. But counseling is responding to the right things. So if you're saying only khaira, only good, then the suggestion is to make sure you're listening effectively so that you can respond to the proper things. Okay? But we'll get into that some other day. Let's get to number 3. You guys probably need a break, right? Oh, what time's Maghrib? In 15 minutes? Oh, we have Maghrib later in Edmonton. Did you know that? We fast longer than you do. We're better than you. Not just joking. Okay. Why don't we hurry up this last part and then we'll open it up for questions. Cool? Or should we just end right now? Yes? Continue? Okay. Number 3. إن من حسن إسلام المرء ترك ما لا يعنيه. From the perfection of Islam is leaving what doesn't concern you. So somebody's talking to you about a problem. Why are you asking about their parents? Why do you want to know about Aslan? Why do you want to know about the problem? Seriously. Somebody comes and says, I got in a fight with my husband. Really? Yeah, that's what his mother probably told him to do. Why? Why, if you're not going to speak good, just stay silent? And in fact, this characteristic of staying silent is one of the hardest things for Islamic da'wah worker counselors to do. Is just be quiet. Just listen. You keep asking about the problem, and I find a lot of my students that have a background and experience in helping others, they struggle with this the hardest. You know why? Because they have to unlearn before they can relearn. And it's so tough for them to not talk about the problem. And so, I'll put them to the test. I'll put them to the challenge. Say, okay, you start asking them the question. Eventually they say, yeah, because I want to kill myself. What are you going to say then? You kept digging and digging and digging, and they said, you know what? You're right. I think I'm going to kill myself then. What's the point? What are you going to say? No, don't despair. Don't get angry. Why not start with hope? Why not start with solutions? Why not start with asking, again, something that concerns you, not something that doesn't concern you? If they start asking you a question about, their financial status, it should be a quick answer. Well, here's a list of people who help with financial resources. And you're done. But what do? We get into things that's none of our business, really. This person should have helped you. Really? You went to the imam? And then what did he say? And then what did he say? And then they make it about themselves. And this happens so often. And we've got a problem because the people that should know how to deal with these issues are either overwhelmed or they don't know how to deal with the issue. It's one of the two. But anyways, we can't blame the people who come to us wanting help. We can only blame ourselves. We have to take that amana on our own shoulders. And finally, what is the requirement for belief in Islam? Now this is where the knowledgeable people in the room rack their brain about shurut, aqidah, all of these things, right? That's what's going on. But socially, look at it from a social lens. What's the most famous hadith you've probably heard when it comes to belief and spreading salam? You're doing a bad job teaching these people. I'm just joking. No, I'm just joking. لا يؤمن أحدكم حتى. You will not enter paradise until you believe, and you will not believe until you love one another. Cool? I think I've drained you out. But you will not enter paradise until you believe, and you will not believe until you love one another. And then the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ gives us a solution. Afshu salama bainakum. So those 4 ahadith. Imagine if everyone practiced those 4. What would happen? Would they not have better akhlaq? To not get angry? To not get yourself involved in things that don't concern you? To love other people unconditionally? And finally, to speak good or stay silent. Now, the scholars of the past, many of them would say, I would be listening to somebody, a young man, and he would tell me something that I heard before he was even born. But still, I would listen to him as though I've never heard it before. Sister, earlier you said, we have Islamic counseling. I've read about it, I've seen it. But what you've seen and read and heard are all these akhlaq and these skills. Bringing it all together is different. When we read statements from scholars like that, we got to go beyond what he just said. And what is he actually doing? He's listening effectively. And if you can't listen like the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ did, which will never reach that standard, but if you can't at least try, then that's where you got to start, in effective listening. So, as I conclude, I think the important thing when it comes to Islamic psychology is, what are we going to do with it? We're going to take Islam, enhance our own understanding and application, take psychology, enhance our understanding and application, and then modify psychology, not Islam, modify psychology so that it makes sense to Islamic workers, it makes sense to Muslim homes, Muslim people. But again, today was just merely an introduction. A very long-winded introduction, wasn't it? Look how people are smiling, not nodding. Like, too long. All right? Any final questions? Yes? Email the admin here, and I'll provide them the information, inshallah. Is that okay? Yes?
So the point earlier, Islamic is not regulated. Cannot we consider the Quran, the Sunnah, that if you have this book, if everyone follows will be regulated based on Quran and Sunnah.
Of course.
The problem are not regulated.
So here's the thing. In Canada, can you take somebody to court for saying that, or can you sue somebody, or can you, have them reprimanded for talking about Islam or calling themselves a Muslim scholar, for example? All right. The thing is, but as we were trying to say, is that there are regulated professions, and the reason why these professions are regulated is because at least there was an association that went to government saying, listen, this is what we're going to do. This is what we want to do. So it's doable. Now, I doubt you're ever going to regulate Islam in Canada, or a religion for that matter, but the idea is, Allahu Alam, but the idea, what I'm trying to say is that regulated professionals are usually have the highest standard. Why? Because they can lose their license. They can get terminated or punished for incompetence. But there are so many other professions. People call themselves professionals, but there's no responsibility, there's no accountability. So one of the very, very important things are that, well, if we're going to hold people accountable, well, accountable to what? What is the right way of doing counseling? What is the wrong way? What is the right way of doing Islamic counseling? What is the wrong way? These questions are being answered by others, but in terms of our communities, at least we can start with our own in-house certification, in-house regulation. Regulate ourselves. And I don't mean wide scale, everything has to be ummah level intervention. I mean just a group of 4 people, 5 people.
Even when you mention also about Imam to be regulated, so that I think it will be on benefits of youth, because the youth, sometimes they listen from different people, different messages. If we have that regulation, then we have one message for them.
Yeah. There's going to be pros and cons, right? Working with government, there's pros, there's always going to be cons as well, right? Like the idea is there's no one right answer to any of this. That's what really, really angers our engineering brothers. What do you mean there's no right answer? What do you mean there's multiple truths? Just joking. You know what I mean? It's a paradigm. It's a way of looking at the world. It's something called equifinality. Sorry to get technical, but the idea is multiple pathways, one outcome. Right? Alhamdulillah, Sharia supports that. That not everybody has this built-in rizq of loving to stand long hours in prayer. Just like not everybody has, as you're saying, not everybody can do certain things, but everybody who can do something should keep focusing on that and hoping for nothing more than qubul from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. See, in my final statement here, I always but I always go back to youth and families when it comes to counseling, okay? And Ibrahim alayhi salam, after everything he went through, you don't think Ibrahim had some sad days in his life? His father kicked him out of the house. Get out of here. I'm gonna attack you. if you keep saying this. And still Ibrahim said, okay, I'm gonna beg Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for forgiveness for you. And later on, he's asked to leave his wife in the middle of the desert, Hajar, with his newborn baby. And then years later he comes back and he says what to his son? Hey, guess what? You know what I mean? But there's something different about these people. Any one of us who went through that would probably have nothing to do with their father. Nothing to do with, especially if he comes back 10 years later and says, hey, listen, I got something for you. I saw in a dream that I'm going to kill you, so let's do it. Yusuf alayhi salam, betrayed by the very same people that were supposed to protect him. Sold into slavery. After all this, also there's Yusr. Oh, he gets freed. Now he lives with foster parents. But he gets abused by his foster mother. Then he goes to jail. And he stays there for a long time. You don't think at any moment he was sad? What did he have? What did they have? That's what we need to understand. So, again, it's a perspective. After Ibrahim alayhi salam built the Kaaba, all that, two things. He begs Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and he says what? Protect me and my offspring from worshipping idols. Ibn Abbas says, وَمَنْ يَأْمِنُ الْبَلَاء بَعْدَ إِبْرَاهِيمِ. Which one of us is safe? Which one of our children is safe? Which one of our grandchildren are safe? In 25 and 50 years from now, when half of us will be dead, what will be happening to the community? You don't think counseling problems and psychological disorders and all these are going to destroy families? You don't think they're already destroying families? We need more skilled people to help others, starting with you. Now you know. But there's another thing though. Ibrahim alayhi salam, after all that, begs Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for qubul. ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم. And that's what I'll end with. ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم. جزاكم الله خير.